All right, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be exploring a topic that's pretty fundamental to the Indian legal system, really.
Yes, definitely.
The high courts.
Absolutely.
You've probably heard of them, seen them mentioned in the news.
Right.
But what exactly are they? Where did they come from? What do they do? And why should we care? That's what we're hoping to unpack today, using, of course, historical documentation, records, things like that.
Yeah, using the sources.
Exactly, to give us that grounded understanding. Our goal is to really extract, the most important information about the High Court's history, how they function, what they do, so you can walk away with a clear and concise understanding.
Exactly.
So to kick things off, I think it makes sense to start with their origins, way back during the time of British rule in India.
Okay, sounds good.
And it seems like a key moment in their formation was the Indian High Courts Act of 1861.
Right.
So can you tell us a bit about that? What was the significance of this legislation?
Well, the Indian High Courts Act of 1861, that was really the foundation upon which the modern high court system in India was built.
Yeah.
It led to the creation of the first three high courts in Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras.
Oh, wow. So right from the start, some of the major cities.
Yeah, these were major centers
Yeah.
of power and administration at that time.
Right.
And this act, it essentially replaced the older systems that were in place.
Okay.
Like the Sadar Diwani Adalat, which handled civil cases, and the Sadar Nizamat Adalat,
Okay.
which dealt with criminal matters.
Gotcha. So it kind of consolidated a lot of the different courts.
It was a big step towards a more unified judicial structure.
I see.
And this is really important because the British, they were really focused on creating a standardized legal process across their vast Indian territories.
Right, makes sense.
To streamline things like governance and, of course, commerce, trade.
Yeah.
It had to be efficient.
Yeah, for their own purposes as well.
Absolutely.
Now, it's important to note here, I guess, that these early high courts, they were still operating under the authority of the British Crown, right?
Yes, that's right. It was still colonial India at that point.
Right.
So they were very much a part of the British legal and political framework.
Gotcha. So then fast forward a bit to India's independence in 1947.
Yes.
What happened to the high courts then? Did they just cease to exist, or what happened?
No. They were actually really crucial during the transition to independence.
Oh, interesting.
And they continued to play a vital role in the newly independent India.
Yeah.
The Indian Constitution, which was adopted in 1950, actually specifically provides for the high courts.
Oh, wow.
Under Articles 214 and 231.
Okay.
And this basically ensured their continuation and actually their reestablishment.
I see.
As institutions of the sovereign Indian Republic.
Gotcha. So the Constitution basically provided a framework for them in this new era of an independent India.
It gave them, a legal basis within the new Indian state.
Yeah.
And it also, I guess you could say it decentralized things a bit because it allowed each state, or sometimes a group of states, to have its own high court.
Right.
Which, was more responsive to local needs.
Makes sense. So bringing things to the present day then, how many high courts are there currently in India?
Well, today there are 25 high courts across India.
25, wow.
Yeah, and you can see how, as India's population grew, as the country became more complex, more states were added.
Right.
The number of high courts also had to increase to keep up with those needs.
Yeah, to make sure that every part of the country has access
exactly
to this higher level of justice.
That's exactly right.
And one that I know is often mentioned, both for its historical significance but also its size, is the Allahabad High Court.
Yes, the Allahabad High Court.
Yeah, tell us a bit about that.
Well, it's the oldest high court in India, actually.
Really?
Yeah, established back in 1866.
Wow, even before independence.
Even before the other, the ones we talked about, the Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras.
Huh,
So
sure.
it has a very long and rich history.
Yeah.
And it's also the largest high court in India in terms of the number of judges and the volume of cases that it handles.
Oh, wow.
So it's a very important institution within the Indian judicial system.
So we've looked at at where they came from, how many there are.
Right.
But let's dive into like what they actually do. What are the main powers and functions of these high courts?
Okay, well, they have a few key powers that are really important.
Yeah.
First, they have what's called original jurisdiction, which basically means that certain types of cases can be filed directly in the high court.
Gotcha.
Without having to go through a lower court first.
I see.
So it's the first court where certain matters can be heard.
Okay. And then there's appellate jurisdiction.
Right.
Which sounds like it has something to do with appeals.
Exactly. So appellate jurisdiction means that the high court can hear appeals against the judgments of subordinate courts within their jurisdiction.
Okay.
So if you lose a case in a lower court, you have the right to appeal to the high court.
Gotcha. So it's a way of kind of checking or making sure.
It's a key part of the checks and balances.
Yeah.
It's judicial oversight.
Yeah.
To make sure that the law is being applied correctly.
That things were done fairly.
Yeah.
Okay, and then there's this term writ jurisdiction.
Right.
And this one, I have to admit, I'm a little less familiar with. What does that mean?
Writ jurisdiction is actually a very important power that the high courts have. It's enshrined in Article 226 of the Constitution.
Okay.
And it allows them to issue writs, which are basically orders.
Okay.
To protect the fundamental rights of citizens.
Oh, wow.
So these writs, they can be things like habeas corpus, which is used to prevent unlawful detention, or mandamus, which is used to compel a public authority to perform a duty.
I see.
So it's a powerful tool that the high courts have to ensure that people's rights are being upheld.
So they're not just, dealing with appeals or specific cases, but they're also...
No, they're much more than that.
Yeah.
They have this very important role in protecting fundamental rights.
So really a key part of the legal system and upholding the Constitution.
I mean, you could even say they're central to the whole system.
Yeah.
Because they're not just hearing cases, they're also interpreting the Constitution at the state level.
Right.
Which has huge implications.
Yeah, making sure that everyone's following the rules.
Absolutely.
That the government's actions are constitutional.
Exactly.
And then, like you said, protecting the rights of individuals.
Yeah, I mean, they're often the first line of defense when someone's rights are threatened.
So they're really vital institutions.
Absolutely.
So to kind of wrap things up, you've now got, I hope, a good overview of the Indian high courts, from their historical establishment under British rule to their continuation and evolution, under the Indian Constitution after independence, the sheer number of them that exist, to serve all the different states and the crucial powers that they have, in hearing cases, appeals. Yeah. But also protecting rights and interpreting the Constitution.
Exactly.
So as we close, I guess a final thought for our listeners would be, these institutions have been around for a long time. They've evolved and adapted over the years.
Right.
And it's fascinating to think about how they'll continue to do so, as India itself continues to change. Yeah,
how they'll continue to shape themselves in response to the evolving needs of Indian society.
Exactly.
Because the law is never static.
Right.
It's always changing.
Always evolving.
To meet the needs of the people.
Well, that's a great point to end on. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.
And we'll see you next time.
See you later.